Look at me when I'm talking to you. The slap came before I could even turn my head. My vision flashed white. For a second, the world disappeared into ringing silence. Then the pain spread across my cheek like fire. I gripped the edge of the kitchen counter to keep from falling. "I'm sorry," I whispered. My voice sounded small, fragile, like it didn't belong to me anymore. Across the apartment, the man who was supposed to marry me stared at me with the cold impatience of someone annoyed by a broken object. "You embarrassed me tonight," he said. "I didn't mean to." "Didn't mean to?" His laugh was sharp and cruel. "You think intention matters when you're representing me?" My stomach tightened, because this wasn't about the dinner. It was never about the dinner. It was about control. His footsteps approached slowly, deliberately. I didn't move. Experience had taught me something important. Running only made it worse. "You're lucky," he said, grabbing my chin roughly. "Without me, you'd still be back in Lagos washing dishes for pennies." I tasted blood, but I stayed silent, because survival had rules, and the most important one was simple: endure. His grip tightened before he finally shoved me away. "Clean yourself up," he said. "You have work tonight." The door slammed behind him, and the apartment fell quiet. Too quiet. I stayed on the floor for a long moment, breathing slowly, counting. 1, 2, 3. The shaking eventually stopped. It always did, because crying didn't solve anything, and broken women didn't survive in cities like Seoul. I slowly stood and walked to the bathroom mirror. The bruise was already forming on my cheek. Dark, ugly. I sighed softly. "Not tonight," I whispered to my reflection, because tonight was important. The restaurant was hosting powerful clients, important men, dangerous men, and mistakes tonight could cost me my job. So I reached for the makeup kit. Foundation, concealer, powder, layer after layer until the bruise softened into something almost invisible. Then I pulled on the long-sleeved uniform. The sleeves covered the bruises on my wrists. The collar hid the fading marks near my neck. Perfect. Practice made hiding pain easy. 3 years ago, I had arrived in Korea believing in fresh starts, a new life, a better future. But dreams don't always survive reality, especially when the person holding your visa also holds your freedom. I grabbed my bag and headed out into the rainy Seoul night. Gangnam glittered with neon lights and expensive cars. The restaurant stood in the middle of it all, like a palace. Inside, everything smelled like polished wood, wine, and money. The manager spotted me immediately. "Amara?" he called sharply. "Yes, sir." "VIP clients tonight, no mistakes." "Yes, sir." I bowed slightly before heading toward the staff station. The other waitresses whispered quietly nearby, but their conversations stopped when I approached. Not out of kindness, out of curiosity, because people notice things, even when they pretend not to. I focused on my work. Orders, drinks, smiles, quiet steps across marble floors. Everything normal, everything controlled. Until the kitchen door swung open and one of the servers rushed in. "You guys heard, he's here." Another waitress frowned. "Who?" The server lowered his voice urgently. "Kang Jae-min." The room instantly went silent. Even the chef stopped talking, because everyone in Seoul knew that name, the underground king, the man criminals feared, the man police avoided, the man people whispered about but never crossed. My manager appeared seconds later, looking nervous. "Everyone behave carefully tonight. No mistakes near the VIP section." I nodded quietly, because men like Kang Jae-min didn't exist in my world. They belonged to a different universe, one filled with power, danger, and consequences. So I grabbed a tray of drinks and walked into the main dining hall. And that's when I saw him, sitting calmly in the private VIP booth, tall, composed, his dark suit perfectly tailored, his expression unreadable. 2 men sat beside him, but the entire room revolved around him. People laughed quieter, walked slower, breathed softer. Power like that changed the air itself. I lowered my gaze and approached the table carefully. "Your drink, sir." My hands remained steady as I placed the glasses down, but as I turned to leave, my sleeve slipped slightly, just for a moment, just long enough to expose the dark bruise around my wrist. I quickly pulled the sleeve back down, hoping no one noticed, but something made the hairs on the back of my neck rise. I glanced up briefly and froze, because Kang Jae-min was staring directly at me. Not casually, not politely. His eyes were fixed on my wrist, sharp, cold, observant, like he had already seen too much. My heart pounded as I quickly lowered my gaze. "Is there anything else you need, sir?" A long silence followed. Then his deep voice finally answered, "No." But the way he said it made something inside me uneasy, because his eyes never left my face, like he was studying me, trying to understand something. I turned quickly and walked away, but the feeling didn't disappear. The feeling of being watched, of being seen. And for the first time that night, I wondered if my secret was no longer hidden. Before we continue, if this story already has your heart racing, type "protect her" in the comments, because what happens next is the moment the entire city of Seoul starts changing, and it begins with a single mistake. One drunk man, one grabbed arm, and one mafia boss standing up. Because 10 minutes later, someone grabbed my wrist, hard, and the entire restaurant fell silent, right as a chair slowly scraped across the floor behind me, and a deep voice said, "Let her go."
Let her go. The voice was calm, not loud, not angry, but it carried something that made the entire restaurant fall silent. The man holding my wrist froze. His grip loosened slightly, but he didn't release me yet. I slowly turned my head, and my stomach dropped. Kang Jae-min was standing, tall, still, watching us. The room had gone so quiet I could hear the rain tapping against the tall glass windows outside. The drunk customer laughed nervously. "Relax," he said, tightening his grip on my wrist again. "I'm just talking to the waitress." Pain shot through my arm. I forced a smile like I had practiced 1,000 times before. "It's okay," I whispered quickly. "Sir, please." "Let her go." The words came again, this time colder. He hadn't moved, but somehow the air around him had changed. The drunk man glanced around the restaurant, finally noticing the way every other guest had suddenly gone quiet. One of Kang Jae-min's men slowly stood beside the table, then the other. Neither spoke, but their presence alone felt dangerous. The drunk customer's smile faded. "Fine," he muttered, releasing my wrist. "No need to get dramatic." I quickly stepped back, rubbing my arm. My heart was racing so fast it felt like it might burst through my chest. But the situation should have ended there. It should have been over. Except Kang Jae-min didn't sit down. Instead, he started walking toward me. Slowly, each step deliberate, each step echoing through the silent restaurant. My breathing grew shallow. Why was he coming here? What did he want? I lowered my head immediately, because powerful men always came with expectations, and expectations usually came with consequences. He stopped directly in front of me, close enough that I could smell the faint scent of expensive cologne. Neither of us spoke for a moment. I kept my eyes fixed on the floor, waiting. Then I heard his voice again, quiet, controlled. "You're shaking." My fingers curled tightly around the edge of my tray. I'm fine, sir." Another long silence. Then, "Look at me." My heart skipped. Every instinct told me not to, but ignoring him might be worse. Slowly, reluctantly, I lifted my head and immediately regretted it, because Kang Jae-min's eyes were studying my face like he was searching for something hidden beneath my skin, something I had tried very hard to hide. His gaze moved slowly across my cheek, then paused. The makeup, the bruise underneath it. I felt exposed, like the thin layer of foundation had suddenly become transparent. I quickly lowered my gaze again. "It's nothing," I said quietly. But something unexpected happened. He didn't step away. He didn't call for another drink. He didn't dismiss me. Instead, his hand lifted, and before I could react, his fingers gently touched my chin. The contact was soft, careful, nothing like the rough grip I had grown used to. My breath caught as he tilted my face upward. The restaurant gasped. People were staring now, whispering, but I couldn't focus on them because Kang Jae-min was looking directly into my eyes, and for the first time since arriving in Seoul, I felt like someone was seeing everything I had tried so hard to hide. His thumb lightly brushed the edge of my cheek, right where the bruise was hidden. His voice dropped low, dangerously calm. "Who did this to you?" The question hit me like a slap. I shook my head quickly. "It's nothing." His eyes didn't move. "Someone hit you." "It was an accident." "Someone," he repeated slowly, "hit you." My throat tightened, because the truth was dangerous, and powerful men didn't help people like me without expecting something in return. "I fell," I whispered. Another silence followed, long, heavy. Then Kang Jae-min finally released my chin. For a brief second, I thought the moment was over, that he would return to his table, that the night would continue like nothing happened. Instead, he turned his head slightly and spoke 2 words to the men behind him. "Find him." The restaurant didn't react immediately, but his men did. Both nodded once, then quietly walked toward the exit. No shouting, no threats, just obedience. And suddenly, the entire room understood what had just happened. Something had begun, something dangerous. My chest tightened. "Please don't," I said softly. The words slipped out before I could stop them. Kang Jae-min looked back at me. "Don't what?" "Cause trouble because of me." His expression didn't change, but his voice became even quieter. "Trouble," he said slowly, "already exists." My stomach twisted. "You don't understand." "Then explain." I hesitated, because explaining meant exposing everything, and exposure meant risk. But before I could say anything, the restaurant doors suddenly burst open. 2 men rushed inside, breathing hard, panic in their eyes. One of them looked directly at me, and my blood ran cold, because I recognized him instantly. He worked for my fiancé, and the moment he pointed at me, I knew something terrible was about to happen. "There she is," he shouted. Every head in the restaurant turned. My heart began hammering, because if my fiancé found out about this, about Kang Jae-min, about the attention, things would get worse, much worse. I stepped backward instinctively, but the man kept walking toward me, angry, determined. "You think you can embarrass him like this?" "I didn't." His hand suddenly lifted, and this time it wasn't to grab my wrist, it was to hit me. But the slap never landed, because another hand caught his arm mid-air, firm, immovable. I slowly turned my head and saw Kang Jae-min standing beside me, still calm, still silent, but the look in his eyes had changed. The temperature in the room seemed to drop instantly. His voice was barely above a whisper. "Touch her." His grip tightened slightly. "And you lose the arm."
The man tried to pull away, but he couldn't because Kang Jae-min wasn't just holding him, he was crushing him. Fear slowly spread across his face. "You don't understand who she belongs to." That sentence changed everything, because for the first time, Kang Jae-min's expression hardened. "Belongs?" he repeated. The man nodded quickly. "She's engaged to—" But he never finished the sentence, because one of Kang Jae-min's men suddenly leaned down and whispered something into his boss's ear, and whatever he said made the Mafia boss go completely still. For several seconds, he said nothing. Then he slowly looked back at me, his voice colder than anything I had ever heard. "Your fiancé," he paused, "is the son of the Han criminal family." It wasn't a question, it was a realization. My stomach dropped, because that name meant only one thing: war. And when Kang Jae-min's men realized it too, one of them said quietly, "Boss, if we move against him—" He didn't finish. He didn't need to. Everyone in the room already knew the truth. Touching the Han family meant starting a city-wide mafia war, all because of a bruised waitress. The restaurant held its breath, waiting, watching, wondering what the most dangerous man in Seoul would do next. Kang Jae-min looked down at me again, then at the bruise on my wrist, then at the trembling man's whose arm he was still holding. And when he finally spoke, his words made the entire room go cold. "Then the war," he said quietly, "starts tonight."
Then the war starts tonight. The words were soft, but they hit the room like thunder. For a moment, no one moved, no one spoke. Even the rain outside seemed quieter. The man whose arm Kang Jae-min was holding began shaking. "You don't understand," he stammered. "If you touch him, the Han family will—" Crack! The sound echoed through the restaurant. Not loud, but final. The man screamed as Jae-min released his arm. It hung at an unnatural angle. Broken. People gasped. Chairs scraped. But Jae-min didn't even look at him. He simply turned to his men. "Take him." 2 guards moved instantly. They dragged the screaming man toward the door, while his friend stumbled backward in terror. "You're making a mistake," the second man shouted. "You have no idea who you're dealing with." One of Jae-min's men paused beside him, then smiled faintly. "Oh, we know." The restaurant doors slammed shut behind them, and suddenly the room felt very small, very quiet, very dangerous. I realized I was still standing beside Kang Jae-min, too close, far too close. My voice came out barely above a whisper. "You shouldn't have done that." He didn't look at me. Instead, he calmly adjusted the cuff of his suit. "Done what?" "Started something because of me." Now he turned his head slightly. His dark eyes studied me again, slowly, carefully. "As far as I can tell," he said quietly, "someone started something long before I arrived." My throat tightened. "You don't understand," I insisted. "My fiancé, he's not just dangerous. His father runs half the criminal network in this district." Jae-min's expression didn't change. "Yes," he said, "I know." That answer sent a chill through me. "You know?" "Of course." My stomach dropped. "Then why would you provoke them?" For a moment he didn't answer. Instead, his gaze drifted to my wrist again, the bruise, still dark beneath my sleeve. Then his voice came low and certain. "Because they provoked me first." The simplicity of the statement stunned me. "You're starting a war over a bruise?" He leaned slightly closer, not threatening, but close enough that I felt the weight of his presence. "It wasn't the bruise," he said. "It was the hand that left it." My breath caught. No one had ever said something like that to me before. No one had ever acted like what happened to me mattered. Not like this. But before I could respond, the restaurant manager rushed toward us, pale, sweating. "Mr. Kang," he said nervously, bowing quickly, "please forgive the disturbance tonight. I assure you this situation has nothing to do with the restaurant." Jae-min looked at him calmly. "You're correct." The manager relaxed slightly. Then Jae-min added, "It doesn't." He turned his attention back to me. "You should go home." The suggestion sounded more like an order. "I still have work," I said quietly. "You're finished for tonight." My manager quickly nodded. "Yes, of course she is." I frowned slightly. "But, Amara," the manager interrupted firmly, "you may leave." Something about the way he said it made my chest tighten, because just an hour ago he had warned us about mistakes. Now, suddenly, he was practically pushing me out the door. I slowly removed my apron. As I did, I felt Kang Jae-min watching me. Not with impatience, not with judgment, just quiet observation. Finally, I gathered my bag. "I'll go now," I said softly. For a second, I thought he might stop me, but he simply nodded once. Good. I walked toward the exit, but the moment I stepped outside, cold fear rushed through me, because two black cars were parked directly across the street, and standing beside them was my fiancé, Min-ho. Even from across the road, I could see the anger in his eyes, the fury, the humiliation, because word had clearly reached him already, and now he was here, waiting. My hands began to shake. Behind me, the restaurant door opened again. Footsteps approached. I didn't need to turn around to know who it was. "You shouldn't go with him." Kang Jae-min's voice came from behind me. I swallowed. "I don't have a choice." "You always have a choice." I laughed softly, the sound bitter. "No, people like me don't." Across the street, Min-ho shouted my name. "Amara!" His voice carried through the rain, angry, demanding. My chest tightened. "I need to go," I whispered. Jae-min stepped slightly closer. "Look at me." I turned slowly. His expression was unreadable. "You don't belong to him." My stomach twisted. "You don't understand immigration laws. Without him, I lose everything." His eyes darkened slightly. "You won't." "You can't promise that." "I can." Something about the certainty in his voice made my heart stutter. But across the street, Min-ho was already walking towards us, and his patience was gone. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" he shouted, storming through the rain. He grabbed my arm violently. "You embarrass me in front of the entire city and then stand here talking to him?" Pain shot through my shoulder. "Please," I whispered, "you're hurting me." Min-ho's eyes flicked toward Kang Jae-min, and rage twisted his face. "So it's true," he sneered. "The famous Kang Jae-min interfering with my fiancé." Kang Jae-min said nothing. He simply watched, calm, still. Min-ho laughed harshly. "Ha! You think you can take what belongs to the Han family?" The words hung heavy in the rain, because this wasn't just a jealous fiancé speaking. This was a challenge, a public one. Min-ho shoved me slightly aside and stepped closer to Kang Jae-min. "You've made a serious mistake tonight." Still silence. Min-ho leaned forward. "Do you know what happens to people who cross my father?" And that's when Kang Jae-min finally spoke. Quiet, deadly. "Yes." Min-ho smirked. "Then you know should walk away." For a moment, the two men simply stared at each other, rain falling between them. Then Kang Jae-min glanced briefly at my bruised wrist, and when he looked back at Min-ho, something in his eyes had changed. "Unfortunately," he said calmly, "I don't walk away from cowards who hit women." The insult hit like gasoline on fire. Min-ho's face exploded with rage. "You think you're better than me?" he snapped. "No," Jae-min replied quietly. "I just know you're weaker." Min-ho lunged forward,
but before he could touch him, 3 black SUVs suddenly screeched to a stop at the curb. Doors burst open. More than a dozen men stepped out, all armed, all wearing the same black suits, and every single one of them stood behind Kang Jae-min. The entire street froze, because this wasn't a confrontation anymore. This was a declaration. Min-ho slowly realized it too. His confident smirk disappeared, because suddenly he understood exactly what kind of monster he had provoked. And when Kang Jae-min took one slow step forward, even the rain seemed to hold its breath. His voice dropped into something terrifyingly calm. "You should let her go." Min-ho's grip on my arm tightened. No. And that single word was the biggest mistake of his life, because behind Kang Jae-min, every single one of his men reached inside their jackets at the same time.
The moment those men reached inside their jackets, the entire street froze. Min-ho's fingers tightened painfully around my arm. But this time, it wasn't anger. It was fear. Real fear. Because standing behind Kang Jae-min were not just bodyguards, they were soldiers. And they moved with the quiet discipline of men who had done this before, many times. Rain ran down Min-ho's face as his eyes darted between them, counting, calculating, realizing. "You think you can threaten me in public?" he snapped, but his voice had lost its confidence. No one answered him, because Kang Jae-min hadn't raised his voice, hadn't even moved, yet somehow the entire situation belonged to him, completely. His gaze remained locked on Min-ho. Let her go. Still calm, still quiet, but something in those 3 words made the men behind him shift their stance. Ready. Min-ho swallowed. For a brief moment I thought he might release me, that he might realize how badly he had miscalculated. But pride is a dangerous thing, especially for men raised on power. His grip tightened instead. "She's my fiancée," he said coldly. "You don't get to tell me what to do with my own woman." The words made my stomach twist, but what happened next shocked everyone. Kang Jae-min smiled. Not warmly, not kindly, but with a faint amusement that sent a chill down my spine. "Your woman?" The way he repeated the words made them sound almost ridiculous. Min-ho lifted his chin defiantly. "Yes." Another quiet pause. Then Kang Jae-min slowly turned his head toward one of his men. "Did you hear that?" The man nodded once. "Yes, boss." Jae-min's eyes returned to Min-ho. "Interesting." Min-ho frowned. "What's interesting?" "That you still believe ownership works that way." The insult landed like a knife. Min-ho's face turned red. "You think you can lecture me?" he snapped. "You're just another criminal hiding behind money and suits." The street held its breath, because insulting Kang Jae-min in public was not something people survived. But Jae-min didn't react the way anyone expected. Instead, he stepped closer, close enough that the 2 men stood only inches apart. His voice dropped low, only meant for Min-ho, but in the silence of the street, everyone heard it. "You hit her." Min-ho scoffed. "So what?" My heart stopped, because the moment those 2 words left his mouth, something dangerous flickered in Kang Jae-min's eyes. Not anger, something colder, final. "You shouldn't have admitted that." Min-ho laughed nervously. "You think anyone cares about a few bruises?" And then, everything happened at once. Kang Jae-min moved, fast, too fast to see clearly. His shot forward and grabbed Min-ho's wrist, the same wrist that was still holding my arm. Pain exploded across Min-ho's face as his grip was suddenly forced open. I stumbled backward, free. Before Min-ho could react, crack! The sound echoed down the empty street. Min-ho screamed. His knee collapsed. He fell hard onto the wet pavement, clutching his shattered wrist. The scream was raw, animal, shocking. But Kang Jae-min simply looked down at him calmly, like a man observing a broken object.
That, he said quietly, is what happens to hands that hit women. The street was silent, except for Min-ho's agonized breathing. I stood frozen, my heart pounding, because I had never seen anyone stand up to Min-ho like that. Never seen anyone punish him, not even his own father. Yet Kang Jae-min did it without hesitation, without fear. Min-ho glared up at him through the rain. "You're dead," he gasped. "My father will destroy you for this." Jae-min didn't even blink. Perhaps. Then he turned toward his men. "Take him." 2 guards immediately stepped forward. They grabbed Min-ho and forced him onto his feet, despite his screams. "Wait!" I cried instinctively. Everyone stopped, even Jae-min. My chest tightened as I stepped forward. "You can't take him." Jae-min studied me quietly. "Why not?" "Because this will make things worse." "Worse than what?" "Worse than what he already does to you?" he asked softly. My throat closed, because the truth hung heavy in the air. I looked down. "I'll handle it." Jae-min's voice became almost gentle. "No." Just one word, but it carried absolute certainty. "I don't need your help," I insisted quietly. "Yes," he said, "you do." Min-ho laughed weakly from the guard's grip. "You think she wants you interfering?" he sneered. "She'll crawl right back to me once you leave." The cruelty of the statement made my stomach twist, but Kang Jae-min didn't look at him. He kept watching me, waiting. For a moment I couldn't breathe, because something about his gaze felt different. Not controlling, not demanding, just protective. "You're free to go wherever you want," he said quietly, "but you're not going back to him." Min-ho spat on the ground. "You think you can just take her?" "No," Jae-min replied calmly. "I'm removing the problem." Then he nodded to his men. "Bring him." The guards began dragging Min-ho toward the SUV. He fought, shouted, threatened. "You're dead at Jae-min," he screamed. "My father will burn your empire to the ground." The car door opened, but right before they forced him inside, Min-ho turned his furious gaze toward me, and the hatred in his eyes made my blood run cold. "This isn't over," he hissed. "You belong to me." The door slammed shut. The SUV sped away. The street fell silent again. Rain still falling, lights reflecting on wet asphalt. And suddenly, it was just me and Kang Jae-min standing there. My heart was racing. "You shouldn't have done that," I whispered. He looked at me calmly. "Done what?" "You just started a war." He tilted his head slightly. "No." My stomach twisted. "Then what did you start?" For the first time since I met him, a faint smile touched his lips. "I ended something." I stared at him, confused. "What?" His gaze moved briefly to the fading bruise on my cheek, then back to my eyes. "You're suffering." My chest tightened painfully. No one had ever said something like that to me before. But before I could respond, one of his men suddenly stepped forward. "Boss." Jae-min turned. "What is it?" The man hesitated slightly, then spoke quietly. "Han Chairman just called." My stomach dropped, because that meant only one thing. Min-ho's father already knew, and powerful men like him didn't wait long before responding. Jae-min's expression didn't change. "What did he say?" The guard swallowed. "He said," he glanced nervously toward me, "if you don't return his son immediately," he paused, "he's sending people to collect what belongs to him." My blood ran cold, because we both knew exactly what that meant. And slowly, Kang Jae-min turned back toward me, his voice quieter than ever. "Looks like you're coming with me."
"Looks like you're coming with me." For a moment, I thought I had heard him wrong. The rain kept falling around us. Cars passed on the distant street. Neon lights reflected across the wet pavement. But the world felt strangely quiet. I stared at Kang Jae-min. "You can't be serious." He didn't respond immediately. Instead, he opened the back door of the black SUV parked behind him. Then he looked back at me. "I am." My heart started pounding again. "I'm not going anywhere with you." One of his guards shifted slightly nearby, but Jae-min raised a hand without looking at him. The man immediately stopped moving. Jaemin's eyes stayed on me. "You have two choices," he said calmly. "I don't remember asking for choices." A faint shadow of amusement crossed his face. "No," he said, "you usually don't." The comment irritated me more than I expected. "I have my own apartment." "Not anymore." The words hit me like cold water. "What?" "Your fiancé knows where it is, and his father now believes you belong to them." My stomach twisted. "So?" "So if you go back there tonight," he continued quietly, "they will come." My voice dropped. "They've come before." That answer seemed to catch him off guard. For the first time, something shifted in his expression. Not anger, not pity, something darker. "How many times?" I didn't answer, because counting those nights would mean admitting how bad things had really become, and I had spent years pretending it wasn't that bad. But Jaemin didn't press further. Instead, he gestured toward the car again. "Get in." "I don't take orders." "No," he said softly, "you take pain." The bluntness of the statement made my chest tighten. "You think you understand my life?" I asked bitterly. "No," he said. Then he paused. "But I understand danger." My voice lowered. "So do I." Not like this. The certainty in his voice unsettled me, because he wasn't trying to scare me. He was stating a fact. Behind us, one of his guards stepped forward again. "Boss." Jaemin turned slightly. "Yes?" "The Han family vehicles have been spotted 2 blocks away." My stomach dropped. "What?" The guard nodded. "They're already searching." I felt the blood drain from my face, because if Minho's father had sent his men already, that meant the situation was far worse than I realized. Jaemin looked back at me, his voice calmer than ever. "Now do you understand?" For the first time that night, I hesitated. Not because I trusted him, but because the alternative was suddenly very real, very dangerous. My voice came out quietly. "This doesn't mean I trust you." He nodded once. "That's fine." I climbed into the SUV. The door closed behind me with a heavy sound. Jaemin slid into the seat beside me. Seconds later, the convoy began moving through the rainy Seoul streets. No one spoke. The silence inside the car felt thick, uncomfortable. I stared out the window, watching the city lights blur past. Finally, I said quietly, "You broke his wrist." "Yes." "You didn't hesitate." "No." I turned toward him. "Does that bother you?" He considered the question briefly. "No." The honesty was unsettling. Most people would at least pretend to feel guilty. I don't pretend. That answer made me study him more carefully, because there was something strange about Kang Jae-min, something that didn't match the stories I had heard. He was supposed to be ruthless, cold, heartless. Yet the only violence I had seen from him tonight had been directed at someone hurting me. My voice softened slightly. "Why did you help me?" He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he looked out the opposite window, watching the rain slide across the glass. Then he said quietly, "Because I've seen what men like him become." "And?" "And I've buried too many women because no one stopped them early enough." That statement sent a chill through me. I didn't know what to say, so I stayed quiet. The car continued moving through the city. Eventually, the buildings grew larger, more expensive, more isolated. The SUV finally slowed as we approached a massive black gate. Security cameras turned toward us. The gate opened automatically, and the convoy rolled into a private compound. My eyes widened slightly. This wasn't just a house. This was a fortress. Tall walls, armed guards, multiple buildings surrounding a massive central mansion. I turned to him. "You live here?" "Yes." "That's not normal." I never claimed to be normal. The car stopped. One of his men opened the door. "Boss." Jae-min stepped out first, then turned toward me. I hesitated before finally following him. The air outside smelled like wet stone and pine trees. Everything was quiet, controlled, safe, and somehow that made me even more nervous. Inside the mansion, the interior was even more intimidating. Polished marble floors, dark wood walls, modern art pieces worth more than most houses. This wasn't just wealth, this was power. I turned slowly. You brought me to your house? Yes. That's not normal. I never claimed to be normal. The car stopped. One of his men opened the door. Boss. Jae-min stepped out first, then turned toward me. I hesitated before finally following him. The air outside smelled like wet stone and pine trees. Everything was quiet, controlled, safe, and somehow that made me even more nervous. Inside the mansion, the interior was even more intimidating. Polished marble floors, dark wood walls, modern art pieces worth more than most houses. This wasn't just wealth, this was power. I turned slowly. You brought me to your house? Yes. That's not normal. I never claimed to be normal. The car stopped. One of his men opened the door. Boss. Jae-min stepped out first, then turned toward me. I hesitated before finally following him. The air outside smelled like wet stone and pine trees. Everything was quiet, controlled, safe, and somehow that made me even more nervous. Inside the mansion, the interior was even more intimidating. Polished marble floors, dark wood walls, modern art pieces worth more than most houses. This wasn't just wealth, this was power. I turned slowly. You brought me to your house? Yes. That's not normal. I never claimed to be normal. The car stopped. One of his men opened the door. Boss. Jae-min stepped out first, then turned toward me. I hesitated before finally following him. The air outside smelled like wet stone and pine trees. Everything was quiet, controlled, safe, and somehow that made me even more nervous. Inside the mansion, the interior was even more intimidating. Polished marble floors, dark wood walls, modern art pieces worth more than most houses. This wasn't just wealth, this was power. I turned slowly. You brought me to your house? Yes. That's not normal. I never claimed to be normal. The car stopped. One of his men opened the door. Boss. Jae-min stepped out first, then turned toward me. I hesitated before finally following him. The air outside smelled like wet stone and pine trees. Everything was quiet, controlled, safe, and somehow that made me even more nervous. Inside the mansion, the interior was even more intimidating. Polished marble floors, dark wood walls, modern art pieces worth more than most houses. This wasn't just wealth, this was power. I turned slowly. You brought me to your house? Yes. That's not normal. I never claimed to be normal. The car stopped. One of his men opened the door. Boss. Jae-min stepped out first, then turned toward me. I hesitated before finally following him. The air outside smelled like wet stone and pine trees. Everything was quiet, controlled, safe, and somehow that made me even more nervous. Inside the mansion, the interior was even more intimidating. Polished marble floors, dark wood walls, modern art pieces worth more than most houses. This wasn't just wealth, this was power. I turned slowly. You brought me to your house? Yes. That's not normal. I never claimed to be normal. The car stopped. One of his men opened the door. Boss. Jae-min stepped out first, then turned toward me. I hesitated before finally following him. The air outside smelled like wet stone and pine trees. Everything was quiet, controlled, safe, and somehow that made me even more nervous. Inside the mansion, the interior was even more intimidating. Polished marble floors, Dark wood walls, modern art pieces worth more than most houses. This wasn't just wealth, this was power. I turned slowly. You brought me to your house? Yes.
Do you bring all abused waitresses home with you? He almost smiled. No. Then why me? Before he could answer, another man suddenly rushed into the room. Older, serious, clearly important. Boss, the man said urgently. Jae-min turned. What is it? The Han family just made their move. My stomach tightened. What do you mean? The man hesitated, then spoke quietly. They just attacked one of our warehouses. The room went silent, because that meant one thing. The war had already begun. But the next sentence made everything worse. And, the man continued slowly, they're asking for the girl. I felt every pair of eyes in the room turn toward me. The man finished the sentence. They said if she's not returned by morning, he looked at Jae-min, they're coming here to take her. The silence that followed felt heavy, dangerous, and when I slowly turned toward Kang Jae-min, I realized something terrifying. He wasn't surprised. He was thinking, calculating, planning, which meant this situation was about to become much worse, because when he finally spoke, his voice carried a cold certainty that made the room freeze. Good. Every guard looked confused, but Jaemin's eyes had already turned toward the massive windows overlooking the compound gates. Let them come. The words settled over the room like falling ice. No one spoke for a moment. Even the guards looked uneasy. The older man who had delivered the message stepped closer. Boss, with respect, the Han family doesn't bluff. If they move on this compound tonight, they won't win, Jae-min said calmly. The man hesitated. That isn't the concern. Now Jae-min turned toward him fully. What is the concern? The man glanced briefly at me, then back at his boss. The girl. Every eye in the room followed that look. I suddenly felt very aware of how out of place I was standing there. A waitress, an immigrant, in the center of a room full of powerful men discussing a war. My throat tightened. This is my fault, I said quietly. Jae-min didn't look at me. It's not. But if I wasn't here, they would still be the kind of men who hurt women, he said. The room fell silent again. I took a small step forward. You could end this. Now he looked at me. How? I go back. Several guards immediately reacted. No, one of them said. That's not happening. But I kept my eyes on Jae-min. If I go back to Min-ho's father, this stops. The silence stretched, heavy. Jae-min studied my face carefully. You think they'll forgive this? They'll forgive their son, I whispered. And they'll punish you. He tilted his head slightly. You believe that bothers me? I swallowed. No, but it bothers you. The truth of that sat painfully between us, because the idea of him suffering consequences for helping me made my chest ache in a way I didn't expect. Jae-min turned away from me slowly, walking toward the tall windows overlooking the compound. Outside, his guards were already moving, positioning themselves, preparing. The entire property was shifting into something closer to a battlefield. His voice came quietly. They're testing me. What? The Han family, he said. They want to see how much I'm willing to risk. I stepped closer. And are you? He glanced over his shoulder. I already did. The answer was so simple it left me speechless. Outside, headlights suddenly appeared beyond the gates. Dozens of them. Engines, vehicles. My stomach dropped. They're here. One of the guards rushed to the window. Boss, approximately 20 vehicles. Another guard muttered quietly. That's not a visit. That's an invasion. The instant erupted with movement. Men grabbing weapons, radios crackling, doors slamming. But through all the chaos,
Kang Jae-min remained perfectly still, watching the approaching lights. I stepped closer to the window beside him. You really expected this? Yes. Then why let it happen? His answer came softly. Because sometimes you end wars faster by starting them properly. The gates outside suddenly shook, heavy metal rattling. Someone on the other side was pounding against them. My heart raced. This wasn't just intimidation. This was an army. The loudspeaker outside crackled to life. A deep voice echoed across the compound. Kang Jae-min. Even I recognized the authority in that voice. Min-ho's father, Han Chairman. You have something that belongs to my family. Every guard inside the mansion looked toward Jae-min, waiting, watching. But he didn't respond immediately. Instead, he looked at me. Are you afraid? The question surprised me. Yes, I admitted quietly. Good. That answer confused me. Why is that good? Because fear keeps you alive. Outside, the loudspeaker boomed again. You have 1 minute to return the girl. My chest tightened. They're serious. Yes. And if you don't? He finally turned fully toward me. Then they'll try to take you. My heart hammered harder. And you're just gonna stand here? He almost smiled. No. At that exact moment, another guard rushed inside. Boss, what? The Han men are bringing weapons to the gate. Several of Jae-min's men immediately raised their rifles. The tension snapped like a stretched wire. But Kang Jae-min calmly raised a hand. No one fires. The guards hesitated. But boss, no one fires. The order echoed through the room. The pounding on the gate grew louder. Metal bending, engines roaring. The Han family soldiers were preparing to break in. I stepped closer to him. You're letting them attack. No, he said quietly. I'm letting them show their intentions. My stomach twisted. And then? His eyes darkened slightly. Then I respond. Outside, the loudspeaker roared again. Time's up. The gates exploded open, metal tearing apart under the force of heavy trucks. Dozens of armed men poured through the entrance. Floodlights lit the compound. Engines, shouting, weapons, war. I stepped back instinctively. They're coming. But Kang Jae-min didn't move, didn't panic, didn't even raise his voice. Instead, he slowly walked toward the front door. My heart pounded as I followed him. Where are you going? To greet them. You can't just walk out there. I can. Why? He paused at the doorway, then looked down at me again. Because leaders don't hide. Outside, the invading convoy had already filled the courtyard, more than 50 armed men, and at the center of them, a tall, older man stepped out of a black sedan. Min-ho's father, Han Chairman, the man responsible for half the criminal violence in the city. He looked directly at the mansion doors and smiled coldly, because those doors were now opening. Kang Jae-min stepped outside alone. No weapon, no guards, just calm. The courtyard fell quiet. Han Chairman laughed loudly. You're braver than I expected. Jae-min said nothing. The older man's eyes shifted past him, toward the doorway where I was standing. Recognition flashed. There she is. My blood ran cold. Han Chairman's smile widened. You really started a war over a waitress. Silence hung between them. Then Kang Jae-min finally answered. No. The older man frowned. Then why? Jae-min's voice became colder than the night air. Because your son forgot something important. Han Chairman tilted his head. And what is that? Jae-min glanced back toward me, then returned his gaze to the older man. That some women, he paused, are no longer yours to hurt. The courtyard exploded with tension, weapons raised, men shouting, the first sparks of a gunfight about to ignite. And standing in the middle of it all was Kang Jae-min, alone, facing an army.
But what Han Chairman said next made the situation suddenly far worse, because his smile returned, slow, cruel. Kill him.
The words echoed across the courtyard. For half a second, no one moved. Then everything exploded. Weapons lifted. Men shouted. The sound of gun safety switches clicking filled the air. I felt my lungs lock with panic, because Kang Jae-min was still standing there, alone, in the open, facing more than 50 armed men. "Boss!" one of his guards shouted from behind me, but Jae-min didn't run, didn't even flinch. He simply raised one hand slowly, and something unbelievable happened. None of his men fired. Not yet. They were waiting for his command. Han Chairman noticed it too. The older man chuckled darkly. "You're disciplined," he said loudly. "But discipline won't save you tonight." The soldiers around him began spreading out, forming a circle, closing in. My heart hammered in my chest. This was madness, complete madness. I ran forward without thinking. "Stop!" My voice cut through the chaos. Everyone turned, even Kang Jae-min. "Amara!" one of the guards shouted behind me, but I kept moving. My shoes splashed through the rain-soaked stone as I stepped between the two sides, between guns, between war, between death. Han Chairman's smile widened slowly. "Well," he said, "look at that." I stopped directly in front of Kang Jae-min, my back to him, facing the army of men aiming weapons at us. My voice trembled. "This has nothing to do with him." Han Chairman studied me carefully. "You must be the girl." "I am." "Interesting," he said. His gaze shifted briefly to Jae-min behind me. "You caused quite a problem tonight." My chest tightened. "I'll go with you." Behind me, I heard Jae-min's voice immediately. "No." I didn't turn around. "You said this war started because of me," I said quietly, "so I'm ending it." Han Chairman laughed. "You hear that?" he said to his men. "She thinks she has power." My hands trembled, but I forced myself to stay still. "You want me," I said. "You don't need to destroy his empire for it." The older man tilted his head. "Why would I settle for one prize when I can take both?" Cold fear spread through my chest. "What do you mean?" He gestured toward Kang Jae-min behind me. "My son's arm is broken," he said calmly. "That requires compensation." Then he pointed directly at me. "And humiliation." His eyes darkened. "You belong to my family." Behind me, I felt something shift. The air itself seemed to tighten, because Kang Jae-min had taken a step forward. His voice came low, sharp. "You don't belong to anyone." Han Chairman smirked. "You're very attached to this waitress." Silence. Then Jae-min answered quietly, "No." The older man frowned. "No?" Then Jae-min's next words changed everything. "She belongs to herself." The courtyard went silent again. Even the rain seemed softer, because those words were not something men like Han Chairman understood. The older man sighed loudly. Enough of this. He raised his hand. Several rifles instantly aimed directly at Jae-min's chest. My breath caught. "Wait," I shouted. Han Chairman looked annoyed. "Yes?" "If you kill him," I said quickly, "you start a war you can't finish." The older man chuckled. "I've been in wars longer than you've been alive." "Not like this," I said. "His men won't stop." Han Chairman glanced around the compound, then smiled slowly. "You're right." He gestured again, and suddenly dozens of guns shifted, now aiming at the mansion, at the guards, at everyone. "We'll kill all of them," he said calmly. The words froze my blood. "Then we burn everything he built." Behind me, I felt Kang Jae-min step closer.
close enough that I could feel the warmth of his presence behind my shoulder. His voice dropped softly. Amara. My name sounded different when he said it, gentler. Move. No. Move. I won't. Silence stretched between us. You're not dying for me, I whispered. His answer came immediately. That wasn't the plan. Before I could respond, a loud metallic sound echoed across the compound. Click. Every guard on Jae-min's side had raised their weapons at once. Dozens of rifles now pointed back at Han Chairman's soldiers. The courtyard had become a battlefield. 2 armies, 1 trigger away from slaughter. My heart pounded painfully. This is insane, I whispered. Han Chairman raised an eyebrow. Your hero seems ready to die. I slowly turned to look at Kang Jae-min, and what I saw shocked me. He wasn't angry, wasn't panicking. He was watching me, only me, like the rest of the world had disappeared. Why? I asked quietly. His voice was barely above a whisper. Because someone needed to stand up for you. The words hit harder than any slap I had ever received. My throat tightened. You don't even know me. I know enough. His hand gently touched my shoulder. Warm, steady. Now move. But I shook my head. No. His eyes darkened slightly. Amara, if you move, I whispered, they'll shoot you. And if you stay, I might stop them. A long silence passed. The rain continued falling. Han Chairman finally sighed loudly. This is getting boring. He raised his hand again. End this. Several soldiers tightened their grip on their weapons. I felt my heart thundering in my ears, because the next second, someone was going to fire, and everything would explode. But right before that moment, Kang Jae-min suddenly stepped forward, past me, directly towards Han Chairman. The movement shocked everyone. Even the gunmen hesitated. Kang Jae-min walked calmly through the line of weapons, straight towards the older man. My voice broke. What are you doing? He didn't answer. Han Chairman looked genuinely surprised now. You're walking into your own execution. Kang Jae-min stopped just a few feet in front of him and spoke quietly. No. Han Chairman frowned. No? Then Jae-min's next words changed everything. This ends now. The older man laughed again. You think you're in control here? Kang Jae-min leaned slightly closer and said something so quietly only Han Chairman heard it. The older man's smile vanished instantly, completely. His face turned pale. Shock, real shock, because whatever Jae-min had just told him changed everything. Han Chairman slowly stepped back, his voice suddenly uncertain. That's impossible. Kang Jae-min said nothing, just watched him. The soldiers around them looked confused. What's going on? One of them muttered. Han Chairman stared at Kang Jae-min like he had just seen a ghost. Then he said something that made my heart stop. You brought her here on purpose. I froze, because I had no idea what he meant. But the next words he spoke made the entire compound fall silent. You didn't protect her, Han Chairman said, his voice shaking slightly. You used her.
You didn't protect her. Han Chairman's voice carried across the compound, trembling with a disbelief that didn't match the confident man who had arrived minutes earlier. You used her. The rain continued falling. Every man in the courtyard looked confused. Even I didn't understand what he meant. My heart pounded as I stepped forward. What is he talking about? But Kang Jae-min didn't answer immediately. He simply watched Han Chairman carefully, studying the fear slowly spreading across the older man's face. And that was when I realized something terrifying. Han Chairman wasn't angry anymore. He was scared. The older man's voice dropped. How long have you known? Kang Jae-min replied calmly. Long enough. The soldiers surrounding them looked at each other in confusion. Boss? One of them muttered. But Han Chairman raised a shaking hand. Quiet. His eyes stayed locked on Kang Jae-min. You're lying, he said. Kang Jae-min tilted his head slightly. Am I? The older man's breathing grew heavier. This girl has nothing to do with our business. Kang Jae-min finally glanced back toward me, and for the first time that night, there was something different in his expression. Not calculation, not strategy, something softer. But when he turned back to Han Chairman, that softness disappeared. You're wrong, he said. My stomach twisted. What are you talking about? Kang Jae-min looked at me again, and this time he answered. 3 years ago, he said quietly, a shipment moved through Lagos. The name of my home city made my chest tighten. A shipment containing illegal weapons meant for the Han family. Han Chairman's jaw tightened. You have no proof. Kang Jae-min ignored him. That shipment was intercepted, he continued, and the man responsible for organizing it disappeared. I frowned. I don't understand. Kang Jae-min's eyes softened again. That man was your father. The world seemed to stop. The rain, the shouting, the guns, everything faded. What did you just say? My voice barely came out. My father was a teacher. He died when I was 16. Han Chairman laughed suddenly, a cold, cruel laugh. That's what we told her. My chest tightened painfully. What? The older man smiled darkly. Your father didn't die in an accident. My heart pounded so hard I thought it might stop. He stole from us, Han Chairman continued, and men who steal from my family don't live long. The words hit like a physical blow. No, I stumbled backward. That's not true. But Kang Jae-min spoke quietly. It is. I looked at him. You knew this? Yes. How? Because I was the one investigating the weapons route. My breathing grew shallow. You knew who killed my father? Yes. And you never told me? His voice dropped. I couldn't. The courtyard was completely silent now. Even the soldiers were listening. Why? I whispered. Because if you knew the truth, he paused, you would have tried to confront them. My hands trembled. I deserve to know. Yes. Then why wait until now? For a moment he didn't answer. Then he said quietly, because tonight they showed their hand. Han Chairman scoffed. You think revealing this changes anything? Kang Jae-min's gaze hardened. Yes. Why? Kang Jae-min slowly stepped closer. Because now everyone understood something. This wasn't just a conflict over a waitress. This was something far older, far deeper. You killed the wrong man 3 years ago. Han Chairman's smile returned faintly. Many men have died because of me. Yes, Jae-min replied calmly, but this one left evidence. The older man froze. What evidence? Kang Jae-min looked toward one of his guards. The man stepped forward holding a tablet. He turned the screen toward Han Chairman. The older man's face went pale. That's impossible, he whispered. But Kang Jae-min continued. The shipment logs, your son's signatures, your bank transfers. The courtyard erupted with murmurs, because suddenly, this wasn't just a Mafia dispute anymore. This was proof that could destroy the Han family. Han Chairman's eyes burned with rage. You think the police will protect you? Kang Jae-min shook his head slightly. No. Then he nodded toward the soldiers surrounding them. They will. Confusion spread across the courtyard. What? Then headlights appeared outside the compound. Dozens, flashing red and blue lights. Police, armored vehicles, sirens. Han Chairman's face twisted with fury. You called them? Yes. The older man laughed bitterly. You think they'll arrest me? Kang Jae-min's voice remained calm. They already have warrants. Within seconds, the gates burst open again. But this time, it wasn't gangsters entering. It was law enforcement.
Officers flooded the compound, weapons raised, shouting orders. The Han soldiers looked around nervously, because suddenly they weren't the hunters anymore. They were the ones surrounded. Han Chairman glared at Kang Jae-min. You planned this. Yes. You used my son's stupidity to bait me here. Yes. His voice dropped into something colder. You exposed yourself. Police officers quickly surrounded the older man. Hands up. For the first time that night, Han Chairman looked defeated. He slowly raised his hands, but before they pulled him away, he looked at me, his voice venomous. You think this man saved you? My chest tightened. He used you just like everyone else. The officers dragged him toward the police vehicles, his voice fading into the rain. He's not your hero. The courtyard slowly emptied, police cars leaving, prisoners taken away, weapons lowered. The war was over. Silence returned. I stood there in the rain, trying to process everything. My father, the truth, the revenge. Finally, I turned toward Kang Jae-min. You used me. His eyes met mine. Yes. The honesty hurt more than a lie. But he stepped closer. That wasn't the only reason. My voice trembled. What other reason? He hesitated, just slightly. Then his hand gently lifted my chin again, just like the first night. But this time, there were no bruises left to hide, only rain running down my face. His voice was quiet. Because the moment I saw you, he paused. I knew you deserved better than the life they gave you. My chest tightened painfully. You still used me. Yes, but I also protected you. The truth of that sat between us, heavy, complicated, real. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then I asked softly, so what happens now? For the first time since the night began, Kang Jae-min smiled. Not the cold smile of a Mafia boss, but something warmer, something human. That, he said quietly, is entirely your choice. The rain finally began to slow. The lights of Seoul glowed in the distance, a city no longer on the edge of war. And for the first time in years, I felt something unfamiliar. Freedom. I looked at him, then gently took his hand away from my chin, not pushing it away, just holding it. Then maybe, I said softly, I'll start by not hiding anymore. His smile widened slightly, and for the first time the most feared man in Seoul looked almost peaceful. And that's how the night the city expected a war ended, with the truth no one saw coming. But now I want to ask you something. If you were in my place, would you forgive the man who used you to destroy your enemy? Or would you walk away forever? Tell me in the comments. And if you enjoy stories about dangerous love, powerful men, and women who refuse to stay broken, make sure you subscribe, because the next story might be even more unforgettable.